Good afternoon. Welcome to Micronaut Vuejs CQRS Part 2. This video is to update. It probably won't replace the existing because that was another way of doing the same thing. I've changed some things around and I wanted to talk through it. So on the main project itself, found here, the previous project I talked through the video around was probably on WebSocket version 1. WebSocket version 2 still does the stuff that was in the diagram, but it's slightly different. It's a bit more like the current diagram or the current latest release, as in everything is still WebSocket driven, but there is all of these handlers for the different command types and event types that happen in the application. Which wasn't there in the original version. That was a string object that was being passed around, and now it's been changed to it's a string object so far as it getting to gateway, and then it becomes a proper command object and then an event object and stuff. So we'll go through it. So before I mean, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up the thing. So I've got a console running here. I'm going to start up Kafka. And it's now slightly different to what I'd explained previously with the starting process, because Gateway is now using HTTP to do its synchronous communication with the command object aggregate routes, not the gateway. So it goes, the process goes all the way to the back end or whatever is interact or dealing with that object and does the validation there. So I'll talk through that in a minute as well. I'm going to start everything up. I hope everything works because I've sort of been doing lots of updates and I've just gone to the diagram because it was working. So I'm going to talk through the diagram and then we're going to run through the site. My machine may slow down with all this stuff going on. So when the user comes in, they hit Vuejs on import 3000. Vuejs deals with both the posts and the gets, and everything that was REST related from the CRUD application that was built originally with Micronaut is different. It's not doing the proper REST calls, it's just doing a post for everything and it's putting as part of it an event type. An event type controls whether it's update, save, delete, or whatever. The get also just does get, doesn't do anything fancy, it wouldn't do anyway, and gets all the information. They're all running on the same site, but what happens within it is it's got different routes. So for this diagram is wrong, by the way. There should be gateway command up here and gateway query down here, and this is going to get updated itself if it hasn't updated already. It has. So that's your command and that's your query. And they run on different ports. And what happens is that they've got a HTTP client, a HTTP event publisher sitting locally, which the thing comes into. The HTTP event publisher is like, well, I'll have to show you what it's like. Because it's just got like a mapping to all the different sort of clients that sit out there. So on the diagram, it shows you HTTP event publisher, which has a mapping to all the different clients, or it dynamically maps to the client that it needs to talk to, which is the HTTP client. And the HTTP client will be the HTTP controller event listener on all of your write applications. So it's a controller, but it's like an event listener. It's dynamic. It just listens into everything. It grabs the command object. It receives the command object, extended command object, which could be anything that relates to command, and retransmits that to the application event publisher. So if I quickly show you in gateway command. So before it was Kafka, everything was being sent to Kafka from the use of once it hit the gateway, it sort of transmitted everything from Kafka from there on in the first video. But in here, it kind of hits this event publisher, which is a sort of an abstract class that gets used by hotel, not client, but hotel listener. and it binds to the hotel client object there and the user listener. So we've got two aggregate routes, and they do that with that publisher. And within it, the user listener calls user client, which is a raw Micronaut way of interacting and passing an object to a HTTP controller on this client. So it's taking advantage of what Micronaut does. I think this part can be done easier in the future. But at the moment, it's kind of referring to the listener sort of expands that to another file to do its work. As you can see here, so it kind of grabs the which one am I in? Grabs the the hotel publisher, HTTP event publisher that sort of has a publish command, and they all sort of are abstract methods of that as such, and it works that way. So it's been tested and it works. So anyway, back to the diagram. So the clients talk to, I should have put console here as well. So there's another console here that talks to the HTTP event listener, which isn't a listener, it's a controller, it's a dynamic one. That publishes to something called application event publisher. So it receives a generic command. It knows it's a command, but it doesn't know what type it is. And it's a one listen that it's listening in for anything that comes in for command. It retransmits that as the proper command to application event publisher. Application event publisher has an abstract command handler sitting there, which listens into any events or commands that's been passed into it. And that then has abstract methods of hotel create command for each command that it will deal with: hotel delete command, hotel update command, handler, and the handlers for those commands. And they simply write to a DB and publish to Kafka event publisher. And they both do the same thing. So they've got a local copy of it locally, and they send it to Kafka. Kafka picks up into the service, and it has listeners on for those Kafka published messages on the these should be read, not write. They should be read on the read sides and the user read sides. I need to update that as well. And when they're picked up by the event listener, they have their own application event publisher, which has an application event listener. And if you pay attention to here, when the command handlers receive the command, they got converted to an event and sent to Kafka event publisher. And these got picked up as an event. So they were commands, but became events. So they're typically the same thing, but with different naming conventions. And on this side, on the read side, they just typically pump it into the DB. And the DB itself talks through console, HTTP controller, HTTP clients, gateway query to the user. So it's got the typical Micronaut route to get the data back from each one of these read clients. In the hotel, it also hotel write. It also talks to user read to get parts of the correlating data it needs put together for hotel read, which has slightly more information than hotel write, which is the username that gets listed or put out onto the screen, but isn't necessarily for the write. That is the whole thing wrapped up of how it works. There's obviously some problems with the diagram I have to update, and I've just noticed them. So I'm going to try and run through this site now and see what happens. Fantastic. Just what we wanted. That is because the gateway isn't running. I forgot to run the gateway. So what I was trying to get to when I got carried away with the diagram is the process is slightly different now. I'm starting gateway query, user base read, user base write, and front end start. They're all being started over here. Then I'm starting hotel write and read over here. And then I've got gateway command. But I'm starting these well before I start this, because in this it tries to talk to HTTP to these, and these need to come up already on console and for it to be available. So a little bit of time is needed for that part of it. Well, about 10-20 seconds. So here's our list of hotels now, and that's gone through typically the route I've just shown you. And what I wanted to show you is that at the moment, if I submit this, it's valid on the front end, but it will go through to back end validation and fail, and that will be coming. Oh, there you go. It's there. That's coming from all the way from hotel right. So that's done the validation at that point and failed it, and the message has been transmitted back to gateway, and from gateway command to Vuejs, and from Vuejs obviously to the user, as you can see on the screen. So if we search by ID now, you can see 163 and it says Carlson. If we get a record to be added, Happy Hotel, HOP, and that's autocomplete. That's been added for the update user. Maybe this is too long. Okay, there we go. And you can see Bill was the ID of the second person, of this person that's been added. So that shows you it working, and also the edit as well has the same validation rule. So if I try 4 characters, which is available on the front end as a validation check, but on the back end it fails, you can see back end has returned this message, and that's gone through a synchronous method from right from the front end to wherever the aggregate route is and back again to the user. And it's got rid of all of that WebSocket stuff that was going on and maps and stuff that was being collected. So I think that wraps up the video. I'm not sure. I haven't really gone into users. I've done some stuff with Hotel and it all seems to be working, so I hope the rest of it works. If there's any questions, please feel free not to raise it as usual. And that's that. Thank you. Bye bye.